My fiance doesn't know that my ex-boyfriend pays for all my bills and my student loans. Am I the asshole for not telling him? Although I do love my fiance, he really never offers to pay for things unless I ask him to. And not that I need him to pay, but it would be nice to know that he has my back for once. After a year of dating, we got engaged. And we've been engaged now for 2 months. I will say my fiance is definitely one of my best friends. I literally can tell this man anything and he never judges me. He's also my hype man, and he's also super funny and we laugh like all day long. So this is the part where I have to tell you about my ex. My ex and I were together for 4 years. He is a very, very successful man, very rich and very handsome. And the reason we broke up is because we would get into really bad fights. He was extremely jealous and so was I. The relationship was absolutely completely toxic. So it's not like I want to get back with him, but he was the kind of guy that paid for everything. Even if I had the money to pay for shit, he would always offer to pay for me. We were so attracted to each other, but we were crazy. When we broke up, my ex told me that he would always help me financially no matter what. He's obviously kept his promise to this day. Part 2 is up. My fiance does not know that my ex pays for my bills and my student loans. Am I the asshole for not telling him? After my crazy toxic relationship with my ex, he promised he would always help me financially. So in 2020 when I lost my job, I hit him up and he sent me money right away. He sent me $10,000 to start with. I paid bills and some of my student loans off, and 3 months later I asked him for another 10 grand. But he actually sent me 30 instead. This held me over for almost a full year. This was right around the time that I met my now fiance. When my fiance and I started dating, of course I was not going to tell him that my ex was paying for my stuff. He just assumed that I had money saved up. Luckily last year I did get rehired at my old job, but with a pay cut. When my fiance and I moved in together, I asked him if he could pay most of the rent, and he said no. He said he was only able to pay for half of the rent, and he literally splits everything. This man even makes me split the cost of toilet paper. I get a Venmo request from him almost every single day every time he buys something. I'm trying not to let it bother me, but at the same time, is he going to be able to support me when I'm pregnant? I asked him if he would be willing to help me financially. He said no. Part 3 is up. My fiance doesn't know that my ex is paying for my student loans and my bills. Am I the asshole for not telling him? That's when I asked my fiance if he could help me out financially. This man said no. I was actually shocked. I started to cry and I told him exactly what I thought. First off, he makes me split everything and never invites me out to dinner. Like, never offers to pay for anything. Even if I wanted like a cookie or something at Starbucks, he doesn't pay for that. I have offered to pay for things for him. Sometimes I'll buy dinner for us on the way home and I don't ask him to pay me. I was really close to confessing to him that my ex was paying for a lot of stuff for me. But that's when my fiance told me that he just thinks it's fair for me to pay for my own things. I asked him, what about when I'm pregnant? What if I can't work? He says that I can just pay for my stuff with my own savings. Then I asked him if he would be able to pay for all the kids' things. He said no, that I would have to pay for exactly half of the kids' things. And I know what you're thinking. The fact that we didn't have this conversation before we got engaged is crazy. Now I really want to tell him about my ex. And I'm even thinking about getting back with my crazy ex. My fiance is just so blah now to me. Like, I can't even look at him the same way anymore. I know I'm not being unreasonable. It's not like I'm asking him to pay for everything. What should I do? Here's a little story time of what my crazy celebrity ex-boyfriend would get mad at if I did or did not do. He would get mad if I would, for example, go to the DMV and put lip gloss on to take a picture. He said that I was trying to get attention from other guys, and the fact that he wasn't going with me proved that I was trying to get attention from other guys, therefore pickup guys at the DMV. He would also get mad if I showed him too much affection or if I tried to kiss him, because he said that that meant that I was a nymphomaniac, and that the only conclusion he could come to was that I was cheating on him because I was a nymphomaniac. So eventually I stopped being affectionate altogether, and that made him think that I didn't want him because I was never affectionate. So I told him one day, well, if I am affectionate, it's bad, but if I'm not affectionate, it's bad. And he said, you're right, so you're stuck. He would also, for some reason, think that I was Lil Wayne's side chick, so anytime a Lil Wayne song came on, I had to. Part 2 of what my celebrity ex-boyfriend would get mad at if I did or didn't do. He would get mad if I answered the phone too quick because that meant that I was hiding something and I didn't want him to be suspicious, but it also made him mad if I didn't answer the phone quick enough because that meant that I was definitely doing something bad. He would also get mad if I offered to go over to his place instead of mine because that meant I was hiding guys in my apartment, in my bathroom and in my closet. So he would randomly show up to my apartment, check underneath my bed, my closets, and my bathrooms. And when he saw that there was no one there, he would storm out and say, I'm going to catch you one day. He would also get upset if my manager or my agent called me telling me that I had an audition because it made him envious, although he would say that what they were trying to do was actually pimp me out. He would get so envious and jealous if I had booked a commercial, if I was working on set, or if I had anything going for me in my life other than him. My husband just confessed to me that he settled for me. Disclaimer is not my story time, send me an Instagram. Ugh. My husband and I met when we were in college. My best friend at the time, let's call her Tori. Her and I lived together and were best friends. We did everything together. I mean, we were like sisters. Let's call my husband Jack. Jack came to school and he was a newbie. He had 0 friends, so Tori and I decided to take him in. So the 3 of us went on to become the 3 Musketeers. He would stay over our apartment so much that we actually just asked him to move in. We would cook for each other, help each other study. We would even do each other's laundry whenever somebody needed help. I'm telling you, we were all like a tight-knit family. But I have a confession. As soon as Jack moved in, I started falling in love with him. But at the time, I never had the balls to ever tell him. You see, Tori was considered the prettier of the 2 of us. And I never resented Tori for that, but people made it very clear that she was the prettier one. And she was always the one to get hit on, never me. But one night, we all got drunk and Jack ended up kissing me. He actually even tried to hook up with me, but I said no. Part 2 is up. My husband confessed that he settled for me. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That night, he tried to hook up with me, but I said no. Following morning, he actually apologized. At the time, Tori had just started dating another guy. I mean, Tori had a new boyfriend every single week. At the time, I wished I could have 1 boyfriend. While she had 10, I had 0. This is when I started noticing that Jack was a little jealous of Tori's new relationship. Anytime her new boyfriend would come over, he would get in a really bad mood. I asked him if he was jealous and he said no. A few days later, we all got drunk again and Jack kissed me again. Eventually, we ended up dating and he asked me to be his girlfriend and then we got married. And that all happened within a year. Tori at this time had already gotten married to the guy that she was dating. We actually both had our weddings around the same time. At the time, I felt so lucky that I was able to marry the man that I had fallen in love with in college. I was actually afraid that I would end up alone because I wasn't as pretty as Tori. Fast forward to a year after we all got married. We actually all ended up living in the same cities as well. Tori invited us over for dinner to see their new house. During the dinner, my husband decided to have a few too many drinks. And that's when he blurted out, "I actually liked Tori before I liked you. I only married you because Tori got engaged." They all laughed at this. They clearly thought it was a joke. I laughed it off too. Part 3 is up. My husband confessed to me that he settled for me. Disclaimers is not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said in front of everyone that he only married me because he lost his chance with Tori. They all laughed. I mean, even Tori's husband found it funny. When we finally got in the car to head home, I asked him if he actually meant it. He looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I liked Tori before I liked you," and that the only reason he hooked up with me was because he was mad at Tori. I started to cry uncontrollably. This whole time, I never thought he had a thing for Tori. He stops the car and he says, "But I love you," that he had no feelings for Tori anymore. I asked him why he would think that was okay to say out loud. He said he had probably had too many drinks. Yeah, it's the alcohol's fault for sure. When we got home, I asked him again if he really loved me. That's when he explained that the love he has for me is different than the love he had for Tori, and that he was actually infatuated with Tori. That our love was safe love. He said, "Just forget about what I said. It was just a joke. I just wanted to make everyone laugh." That's when I realized that he had made a joke at my cost. And it was all to make Tori laugh. Called Tori the next day and explained everything to her. That's when she confessed that her and Jack had been hooking up in college. That sometimes they would hook up when I was asleep on the couch. That they had even done it on top of the kitchen counter and in my bedroom. I told my husband, and that's when he said that I needed to let it go. That Tori was part of the past. He doesn't even touch me or kiss me. He's always angry and reproaching everything that I did. Thinking about leaving him. We don't have kids yet. What should I do? Is it weird that my boyfriend keeps asking for feet pictures dipped in peanut butter? My boyfriend and I have been together for 6 months, and within the 6 months, I realized he has a lot of weird fetishes. He's completely obsessed with my feet and always wants to touch them. He also loves it when I wear black stilettos, but lately he's become more demanding. We see each other on the weekends because we live about 2 hours from each other. This means he's always asking me for pictures. But now it's gotten to the point where he's asking me to send him pictures of me dipping my feet in different food. For example, chocolate sauce or peanut butter. And the worst one, mustard. I mean, I want to say yes to all of these things. And when I say no, he gets really angry. He threatens to break up with me and says that I'm not fulfilling his needs. He slept over at my place the other night and I found him looking at really weird stuff on the internet. Like a lot of weird feet stuff. I can't even describe it. It was so disturbing. But I do love him and I don't want him to leave me. Should I just give in and send him the feet pictures with the peanut butter? Or should I stay strong and say no? What should I do? Story time about how my father is obsessed with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I'm sending me on Instagram. And trigger warning. My mom and dad had me when they were very, very young. My mom was 14 years old when she got pregnant with me. From what my mom told me, my parents were pretty much together throughout the whole pregnancy. Even though they were both in high school, they wanted to move in together and try to raise me like a regular family. But my maternal grandmother had a very big issue with this. She wanted my mom to continue going to high school and possibly even give me up for adoption. But my mom was not having it, so she decided to move out with my dad. Once I was born, unfortunately, my parents just couldn't take care of me. My dad was too busy playing his football and trying to get a scholarship. And my mom just didn't really know how to take care of a child. I mean, she was a child herself. This is when my grandmother stepped in and decided to take me in, which I thank God for every single day of my life. My grandmother raised me as her own daughter, and she has been the most amazing woman in my entire life. My parents split up, and through most of my childhood, I lived with my mom and my grandmother. I didn't see my dad for about 10 years. By the time I saw him again, I was 15 years old. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my father is obsessed with me. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's that I mean on Instagram. And trigger warning. I finally saw my father again when I was 15 years old. From the moment he saw me, he wanted to hug me and kiss me all the time. At first I thought it was normal because he's my father and he hadn't seen me in over 10 years. After a few weeks of him coming to visit me, I started feeling really strange. This was also around the time where I was getting noticed by boys in school. And you know that feeling you get when you know a guy likes you? Well, that's the feeling I started getting from my own father. Every time he touched me, it was like too touchy. And every kiss was just strange. One of the things that really started to bother me was that he liked going to the beach, and he wanted to make it a thing. He would always say, let's go to the beach on the weekend, but I didn't feel comfortable with him. First off, he never invited my mom to come or my grandma, so it was always just me and him. He even took me shopping for bikinis, and this is when my stomach dropped. At the bikini shop, he asked for small bikinis, like the type that show a lot of skin. Told him I wasn't comfortable with that. I wanted a bathing suit. He said no and bought me a thong bikini. He stared at me all day at the beach. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how my father is obsessed with me, part 3. After he bought me the thong bikini and forced me to wear it at the beach, I noticed he was staring at me. I wrapped myself in a towel and told him I wanted to leave. After that, I told my mom and my grandma how I felt about my dad. They thought that I was exaggerating, but I knew that I wasn't. My mom asked him to never ever do anything like that again, and he said he wouldn't. After that, he would always do certain things, like stare at me too much, or always want to hug me and kiss me. And for my own comfort and safety, I put a lot of space between him and I. When I was 18, I finally got my first boyfriend. He became enraged when my mom told him. He told my mom that I was acting like a slut. That's when I cut him out completely from my life. A year later, I got on Instagram, and that's when he started following me there. He started leaving strange comments on all my pictures, and eventually he started offering me money to spend more time with him. I told him I wasn't comfortable with him. That's when he told me that all he wanted to do was watch me take a bath, and that he would pay me thousands if I let him. My grandmother and my mom have completely cut him out of our lives. On the day of my wedding, we hired security to keep him away. And of course, he managed to show up, but security kicked him out. I'm thinking I should get a restraining order. Luckily, my mental health hasn't suffered too much from this. He's obviously an unwell person, but I actually feel really bad for him. And I feel like getting a restraining order is just gonna make things worse. What the heck should I do? Bye. My husband won't stop slut-shaming me because I told him that I used to strip. How do I get him to stop? Disclaimers are not my story time, it's that I made on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 3 years. We actually got separated at the beginning of this year, and it was actually good for the both of us. My husband's always been a little bit, macho is the way I want to put it. He sometimes has a habit of humiliating me in front of his friends. I actually have a job that pays more than his, and this has always been a problem for him because he feels like he should be the breadwinner. So he basically makes jokes about how I'm the guy in the relationship. Our friends and family think it's totally inappropriate, but I think it's kind of funny. But when my friends explained it to me, it is kind of bad, I guess. I own 2 e-commerce businesses that I run from our house, so I'm essentially home all day. Recently, we decided that we wanted to have kids, so we started trying. Unfortunately, my husband comes from a family where they believe the women should be doing all the cooking and the cleaning. So my husband expects for me to do all of those things. And if I don't, he tells me that I'm a bad wife. He also likes to control how I dress, and he doesn't like me drinking. A few weeks ago, we went to a friend's party and I got a little drunk. And on the way home, I decided to make a confession that I used to be a stripper. Part 2 is up. My husband won't stop slut-shaming me because I told him that I used to strip. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, I said it on Instagram. And that's when I confessed that I used to be a stripper. Right then and there, he pulls the car over to the side of the road. Then he actually started interrogating me. He asked me when I started, how long I did it for, where I stripped, what I wore, what the worst thing I had ever done was. He was trying to get all the tea. Immediately, I regretted it. I honestly didn't think that it was going to be a big deal. I mean, we have been married for 3 years now, so I thought that he would be more accepting of it. But that's when I remembered he comes from a family where they think that women shouldn't even have rights. I tried to take it back as a joke, and he said that's not going to work. Proceeded to ask me questions for 2 hours on the side of the road. It was already 3 in the morning. By the end of it, I was so exhausted I started to cry and begged him to take me home. Then he said that he was afraid of even going to bed with me because I might give him an STD. That's when he told me that I probably took money for sex. I had succeeded into digging myself into the deepest hole ever. I begged him to forget and he wouldn't. That's when he pulled out his phone and started texting his brothers. He told them everything. When we got home, he made me sleep on the couch. Part 3 is up. Husband won't stop slut-shaming me because I told him that I used to strip. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. He actually made me sleep on the couch for a full week. And he basically gave me the cold shoulder every single day. He wouldn't even look at me when I talked to him. He would do was ask me for food. Sometimes he'll just come up to me and be like, "What are you doing, slut?" His brothers told him that I was probably doing the dirty with all of these guys at the strip club, and that he shouldn't believe a word that I say. A few nights ago, he sat me down and started interrogating me again. He told me that he wanted me to tell him the truth, and for me to just confess that I had done it with all of my clients at the strip club. He's actually even threatening to go to the strip club where I used to work to ask questions about me. Mind you, the strip club is like 10 hours away from where we live. He even checked my phone and my laptop. He says that he's scared that I might still be in contact with my clients from the strip club, and that he doesn't know what I'm capable of anymore. I've been begging him for forgiveness every single day, but I kind of want to tell him to F off now. Can't take him calling me names anymore. Luckily, my parents fully support me and want me to move in with them. The only thing that I'm afraid of is that if we do get a divorce, he's gonna try to take all of my money. I have way more money than he does in the bank, and he knows it. I've been totally honest about how much money I earn. Big mistake. What should I do? Storytime about how my date asked me to pay for half of the smoothie we shared. Should I be going on the second date with this guy? Disclaimer, this is not my storytime, it's sent me on Instagram. So I met this guy on Tinder, of course. We hit it off right away through text message, and I thought that it was sus because he was too nice, but I decided to give him a chance. We're both really into fitness, so we decided to go on a hike. Because we live in LA and everyone does the same thing, so why not? But before the hike, he asked me if I wanted to get smoothies. I said of course because I love smoothies. I told him I didn't really want a full smoothie, so I asked him if we could share and he said yes. We got a banana peanut butter smoothie. The total came out to $8.45. In my mind, I thought he was totally happy paying for it. We drank the damn smoothie while we were hiking, and I thought everything was fine. We had great conversation, and the sexual tension between us, oh my god. You could literally cut through it with a knife. As we finish up the hike, he says, "Do you mind Venmoing me for half of the smoothie?" I laughed because I thought it was actually a joke. Then he says, "Why are you laughing?" And I said, "Oh, are you serious?" And he said yes. We stared at each other for about 10 seconds. So I pull out my phone and send him $4. Then he goes in for a freaking kiss. At this point, I was completely turned off though. What kind of person offers to get a smoothie and then asks me to pay for half of it? I let him kiss me for about 3 seconds because I was curious. It was a super sloppy kiss, so ew. Then he begs me to go on a second date with him. But when I told my mom and friends that he made me pay for half of the smoothie, they said not to go on the second date. But I'm really attracted to this guy. What should I do? Storytime about how my husband keeps borrowing money from me and now wants access to my bank accounts. What should I do? Disclaimer, this is not my storytime, it's on my Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 6 years. When we first got married, we were really young, so we were living with our parents. We didn't actually move out from my parents' house up until 2 years ago. In fact, I don't think we're actually adults yet. We both still act like we're teenagers. I'm 24 and he's 25. I recently got myself a really good job. He, on the other hand, has never had a really good job. He does a lot of odd jobs here and there, a lot of catering. He also models because he's extremely good looking. So now that I got myself a job, I wanted to get my own apartment. But of course, I have to include my husband because we're married. He actually ended up getting an okay job. We decided to split the rent and everything was going fine. But then he got laid off and this is when things started going bad. He started asking me for money because he wasn't getting paid anymore. Every now and then he would ask me for like $10 or he would ask me for my debit card. At first, it was just small purchases like going to the supermarket or going to Starbucks. So I gave him my card. One day I'm checking my bank account and I realized that he bought himself a $600 watch. You'll never guess what he said when I confronted him. Part 2 is up. Storytime about how my husband keeps borrowing money from me and now wants access to my accounts. What should I do? Disclaimer, it's not my storytime, it's sending me on Instagram. When I confronted him about buying a $600 watch with my money, he told me that he has every single right to use my money as much as I do. And even though I'm the one earning the money, he is my husband so he can do whatever he wants with it. I got so angry I picked up one of my crystals and threw it right at his head. Luckily it missed him, but it did scratch his ear. He went berserk and accused me of trying to kill him. He ran over to the ER with a scratch on his ear. I went straight to my parents' house and I told them what was happening. Obviously my parents agree with me that he should not be spending $600 of my money on a stupid watch. And they told me to take away any access he had to my money. So I took away my debit card and my credit card from him. We both ended up apologizing to each other, so for a few months it was okay. He had a few jobs, so he had some spending money for himself. But then he got fired again. That's when he asked me politely to add him to my bank account so that he could get his own debit card from my account. To be honest, at first I thought it was okay, but I didn't say yes or no. I called my parents and they told me absolutely not. And when I told my husband, he threatened to divorce me. He says that I'm neglecting his needs. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my husband keeps borrowing money from me and now wants access to my bank accounts. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on me on Instagram. That's when he threatened to divorce me because I wouldn't give him access to my checking account. He said that I was neglecting him. That's when he told me that if the tables were turned, he would be expected to give me money. And you know what? Totally true. At the same time, I can't allow him to just buy $600 watches. He then made a promise to me that he would only use the money for necessities. So for example, paying bills or anything like that. Although we already have our bills on auto pay, so I'm not sure how that would work. So I took him to the bank and I added him to my account. I know you all must think I'm so stupid right now. And you know what? I am. 2 days later after he got his debit card, I checked his bank account and he had signed up to 3 different OnlyFans accounts. That's a total of $50 a month coming out of my paycheck plus all the things that he buys on the website. I confronted him again and he told me that it was just for fun. And that because I'm at work and he's home alone, he needs something to entertain himself with. Then he told me that if he didn't have the OnlyFans accounts, he would probably end up just cheating on me. And then he asked me, what do you prefer, me watching stuff online or me actually going out and finding women? This is where I need your help. I see his point, but I'm not sure if this is like manipulation or something. He really seems so genuine and he's always doing my laundry, cooking, and cleaning up for me. Even rubs my feet when I get home from work. And I haven't told my parents about this. I think they'll hit the roof. Should I let him have access to OnlyFans and use my money? Or should I put a stop to it and risk him cheating? What should I do? I walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. My boyfriend moved in with his gay best friend 6 months ago. Here's a little backstory. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost 2 years. My boyfriend is a social butterfly. He has 1,000,001 friends. I got used to this very quickly because most of them were female and a lot of them were gay. They actually became my friends too in some cases. Early on in the relationship, I met one of his best friends. Let's call him Tim. Tim is very, very gay. And he doesn't hide the fact that he thinks my boyfriend is very attractive. I asked my boyfriend if Tim ever made him feel uncomfortable, and he said no. But here's the thing. Tim sometimes says the most outlandish things about my boyfriend. Yeah, my boyfriend is hot. He's super fit, has a great face, so Timmy loves to comment on his body all the time. On several occasions, he's made really dirty jokes about my boyfriend's butt and the things that he'd like to do to my boyfriend's butt. Every time they go out, he's always trying to get my boyfriend drunk. And when he succeeds, he always takes off his shirt. So then my boyfriend spends the rest of the night shirtless. Obviously, this bothered me, but it didn't bother me enough to ever be concerned. Boy, was I wrong. A few weeks ago, Timmy threw a party and told my boyfriend not to invite me. I got really upset, so I showed up anyway. Timmy was trying to kiss my boyfriend. Part 2 is up. I walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. I instantly knew the only reason I didn't get invited to the party was so that Tim could try to get with my boyfriend. But here's the thing. My boyfriend had so much patience for Timmy. Even though Timmy would make such perverted jokes about my boyfriend would laugh it off and tell me it wasn't a big deal. But I knew it did make him uncomfortable. But of course, I show up to the party anyway. When I got there, I found Timmy sitting on the couch with my boyfriend. My boyfriend was clearly drunk, and Timmy was trying to kiss his neck. As soon as Timmy saw me, he got up from the couch and asked me what I was doing there. He said that it was a boys only party. When I looked around, it actually was. There were no other women there. I told Timmy that I was going to take my boyfriend home and he said that I was overreacting and that my boyfriend was just having fun. I walk up to my boyfriend and he is so drunk, he doesn't even recognize me. I grabbed him and got him out of there. The next day, I told my boyfriend that Timmy was trying to kiss him when he was drunk. But of course, my boyfriend defended him. And my boyfriend confessed to me that he knows Timmy has a crush on him and that he's basically his best friend out of pity. Then my boyfriend actually told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Timmy. Part 3 is up. I walked in on my boyfriend doing the dirty with his gay best friend. That's when my boyfriend basically told me I needed to stop being a bitch to Tim. I decided to ghost my boyfriend for 2 days because I was so upset at him. But here's the thing, my boyfriend was ghosting me too. So I decided to go over to his apartment because I hadn't heard from him in 24 hours. My boyfriend had given me a key to his apartment, by the way. But before I put in the key to unlock the door, I hear moaning sounds coming from inside. I instantly knew what was happening. Quickly unlock the door and find my boyfriend getting banged on the couch by his gay best friend. It's an image I can never forget. I'm actually traumatized. They separate and my boyfriend comes running over to me. First thing out of his mouth was, "We were just experimenting, it's not a big deal." He thought I was gonna be like, "Oh, cool." I look over at Timmy and he's on the couch smiling. I couldn't help myself and I slapped my boyfriend really hard. I ran away and didn't talk to him for 2 days. He finally came over to my apartment after those 2 days and explained that it was just something experimental. And he swears that they've never done it before and that they never will again. I took him back, but I don't trust him. He says that Timmy will always be his best friend and that I shouldn't get jealous. What should I do? Storytime about how my grandmother predicted that I would get kidnapped when I was 14 years old. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My grandmother and I have always had a very close relationship. We're Mexican and my grandmother believes in ghosts and legends. In the town that we lived in, there was always a legend about girls who got kidnapped. When I turned 7 years old, my grandmother told me that I would be kidnapped when I was 14 years old. My parents and I didn't believe her. My grandmother never let me out of her sight after that. Even if I was going to go to the park and play, she would always come with me. It wasn't until I turned 14 years old that it happened. I was walking home from school and it was the first time that I was walking home by myself. Somebody was always there to pick me up, but this time no one was there. The crazy thing is that my grandmother got confused on the day. So my parents didn't think that they needed to go pick me up because they thought my grandma would. As I turned a corner, a man snatched me up and put me in his car. And he had the scariest mask on. He looked like the devil. My grandmother instantly knew that something had happened to me. She ran over to my school, but I wasn't there anymore. For 2 hours, the man drove me around in his car looking for a perfect spot. Whenever I would ask him where he was taking me, all he would say was, "I'm looking for privacy." When he first took me, he tied my hands behind my back. He threw me in the back of the car, and every now and then he would turn around and grab at my clothes. He was trying to rip the clothes off of me, but every time he would try to grab my clothes, I would bite him really hard. I made him bleed several times, but this only made him angrier. We finally stopped in a supermarket parking lot. That's when he told me to stay quiet and he left the car. But I was more afraid of what he would do with me if I stayed than if I left. I managed to get out of the car without him seeing me. I ran for a minute before I heard him screaming behind me. Reached a highway and a woman stopped her car to help me. She took me back to my parents' house, and that's when I found out my grandmother had had a heart attack. She knew that I was kidnapped and my parents went crazy. They took me to the hospital, but I was actually okay. I went into therapy for years after that. Legend has it the man is still kidnapping girls. I drive my car every single night in the same route that he drove me. What should I do when I find him? My husband won't stop texting his coworker and doesn't even bother hiding it from me anymore. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. My husband got a new job about a year ago. He finally started earning a lot of money and he really loves his job. I'm a substitute teacher, so at the time, we were really broke. We were desperate for one of us to get a better job. A few weeks after he started his new job, his boss threw a party so that we could all get to know each other. And this is when I met Karen. Karen right away came up to me and tried to make me feel like she was my best friend. She started talking to me about really personal stuff right away. In other words, she was trying to let me know that I could trust her because she was telling me her deepest, darkest secrets. But I don't fall for that kind of shit easily. As the barbecue went on, I kept noticing that she would talk to my husband a lot. And my husband would reciprocate. If he was at the bar, she was at the bar. If she was trying to grab food, he was trying to grab food. I called my husband out on it and he told me that they were really close friends at work. And that she was basically his work wife. I told him he needed to stop that real quick. Otherwise, I would move in with my parents. For the rest of the barbecue, he behaved like a little lamb. Only 2 weeks later, I find messages between them. Part 2 is up. My husband won't stop texting his coworker and doesn't even bother hiding it from me anymore. Disclaimer, is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. 2 weeks later, I find messages from Karen on his phone. At that point, I had completely forgotten about Karen. My husband and I try to do date nights every single week. On this one occasion, we sit down at a restaurant, and his phone kept going off, pinging almost every single minute. He wouldn't turn off the sound. 7th time it rang, I decided to pick up the phone only to silence it. I mean, at this point, I have no reason to not trust him. But when I take a quick glance at the messages, it said work wife. My blood instantly began to boil. That's when he tried to take the phone from me, but I pulled it back. I opened the messages and see that they were having a conversation about me and him going to dinner. And how jealous she was that she couldn't come with him. Mind you, we're sitting in the middle of a restaurant. That's when my husband says, "Go ahead and read it. I don't give a shit." I look at him and I couldn't recognize him. Like, I literally could not recognize his face. He looked like a different man. He was no longer the considerate, loving husband. He was now just some other guy texting another girl. As I read through the messages, the tears started flowing down my face. And I made a scene. I told him he needed to stop texting her. Then he says, "No, I like her. Why would I stop?" Part 2 is up. My husband won't stop texting his coworker and doesn't even bother to hide it from me. Disclaimer, is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. That's when he told me that he liked her and why would he stop texting her. I actually had to sit there at the restaurant and explain to my 30-year-old husband why it was inappropriate for him to be texting his work wife. He said they were doing nothing wrong by texting each other. That's when I told him that if he didn't stop texting her, that he could forget about me. He said that there was nothing wrong with him having friends. I told him that friends shouldn't tell each other that they're jealous if they're going out with their wife. And he explained that it was just banter. She loves playing at being jealous. Ew. Then he said this: "Would you rather me hide the messages from you?" My stomach sank. This man clearly does not understand that what he's doing is wrong. We've never had a problem like this before. We've been married 3 years and this has never been a thing. I got up from the restaurant and took an Uber home. Do you think he chased me? No. It wouldn't be another 4 hours until he got home. I asked him where he'd been and he told me that he was just chilling at the restaurant. For 4 hours? I asked him once again if he would stop texting her and he said no. That again, they were not doing anything wrong. But their messages were like boyfriend and girlfriend messages. Things like, "What do you want for lunch this week? I miss you. I'm jealous that you're going to dinner with your wife." After he said no, I packed my overnight bag and I went to his parents' house. My parents live 2 hours from me. I told his parents everything and they went over to talk to him right away. And they were pissed. His dad even threatened him to take him out of his will. His parents have my back and told me that I could stay with them. But instead, I went home to my parents. I also just found out that Karen has a boyfriend. Should I tell her man? Or should I just divorce my husband and forget the whole thing? Whatevs. My boyfriend's brother got me pregnant and now I don't know what to do. 3 months ago, I started dating this new guy. He was so sweet and good looking. He took me to meet his very rich family right away. I walked into their beautiful house and his brother came right up to me and gave me a kiss. Now let me say this. My boyfriend and his brother are almost exactly identical. They are both extremely good looking. They're both super muscular and really good shape. They both have long brown hair. They both have green eyes and tan skin. I mean, they are virtually perfect looking. Here's the difference. My boyfriend is so sweet, while his brother is more of a bad boy. Flirts with me in front of his whole family. And they all think it's hilarious, even my boyfriend. But here's the problem. The more I
I visited their house, the more I realized I was getting butterflies every time I saw his brother. And it's like his brother knew it. He would look deep into my eyes while we had conversations. He always looked like he was about to kiss me. One day my mother-in-law decided to take me shopping to Bloomingdale's. She ended up buying me a $2,000 necklace. These people have money. When we got back to the mansion, I decided to put the necklace on. But as I was struggling, my boyfriend's brother decided to help me out. Slowly put the necklace on me. Then he started smelling my neck. Then he started kissing my neck. And then he started kissing me and we started making out. I couldn't help it. Part 2 is up. That's when my brother-in-law started kissing my neck. Then he made his way to my mouth, and we started making out, passionately. I physically couldn't stop myself from kissing him. After we kissed for a minute, we realized we were in the kitchen. Anybody could walk in on us. That's when he grabbed my hand and took me outside by the pool. He took me behind the pool house, and then we just started kissing more. We were back there for like 20 minutes. So my phone rings, and it's my boyfriend, his brother. I push him off, and I run back into the house. For the rest of the night, he just kept staring at me, and I basically just tried to avoid his gaze. We didn't talk about the fact that we kissed at all for like 2 weeks. After the 2 weeks, I found myself alone in their house again. He comes up to me and starts trying to kiss me again, but this time I did have a little more self-control. He did something I never expected. He picked me up straight off the couch, threw me over his shoulder, and took me to his bedroom. Then he started kissing me more. And again, I gave in. I couldn't help myself. It's like I physically can't stop myself from touching him. He kissed on his bed, and then it happened. Yep, we did it. It was amazing and magical, but I instantly felt remorse. Let me clear something up though. I am still very, very attracted to my boyfriend. I mean, if anything, I would have rather done it with him, but there's just something about his brother that I find intoxicating. I instantly felt sick to my stomach. I left his room and went back home. My boyfriend called me and asked me why I wasn't waiting for him at his house. I told him that I didn't feel sick, so he came over and brought me chicken soup. I just did the dirty with his brother and he brought me chicken soup? You can imagine how guilty I felt. 2 weeks later, I wasn't getting my period. So I took a test and it turns out I'm pregnant. And I'm pretty sure it's his brother's. I broke the news to him and his family that I'm pregnant and they're so happy. He proposed to me and we're engaged now. His brother, on the other hand, still tries to kiss me. But he just got a new girlfriend. We'll never tell the truth though. Or should I?
My best friend told my parents that I lost my V card because she was jealous. 2 months ago, I started dating a new guy at our high school. He was the new guy in school and every girl wanted to be with him, including my best friend. Now, before this, my best friend and I had never had any problems between us. She never showed herself to be envious or jealous of me, so I trusted her. And I literally told this girl everything. The new guy started showing me a lot of attention. He followed me on Instagram and DM'd me right away. Apparently, I reminded him of his ex, who he was obsessed with. One morning, my best friend and I are hanging out before class starts. The new guy walks up to us, says good morning to us both, and then asks me if he could talk to me privately. That's when my best friend says, "You can talk in front of me. I'm her best friend and she trusts me." So then he proceeded to ask me out in front of her. The look on her face was terrifying. She was so pissed off. Of course I said yes and he walked away. That's when my best friend said, "Oh my god, he's kind of ugly. Did you smell his breath? It stinks really bad. Why would you ever go out with that guy?" Then she says, "You better not go out with him." Part 2. That's when she said, "You better not go out with him or I'll tell your parents." I looked at her and said, "You wouldn't dare." She's like, "You're right, I wouldn't." By the way, my parents were very strict. They'd never let me go out on dates, much less have a boyfriend. The weekend comes around and I'm getting prepared for my date. So I told my parents that I was going to be with my best friend the entire weekend. And of course, they believe me. I send her a text message saying, "Hey, I told my parents I'm going to be with you. So if they ask you, you got to cover for me." She says, "Of course I will." I go on the date with the new guy and it was so much fun. For the first time ever, I was treated like a girl. He held my hand, he was kissing my neck, and he paid for everything. Like I said, up until that point, I'd never really had an experience like that. I was falling for him quick. We'd gone to watch a movie and at the movie theater, he started kissing me. Of course, I kissed him back. That's when he asked me if I wanted to go back to his house because his parents weren't home. And I said yes. As we're driving to his house, I was so excited. So I texted her out of excitement telling her that I was going to be going back to his house. She replied and told me that I was a slut and that I was being too easy. She even asked me to send her a picture of what I was wearing, which I did. Then she replied, "You'd look like a slut." Then we got to his house and we started making out again. Part 3 is up. That's when we started doing the dirty in his room. All while my best friend is slut-shaming me. Could hear her messages come in as we're on his bed. I grab my phone and silence it and see that I have about 20 text messages from her. I read the first one and it said, "You better not be effing him right now, or I will tell your parents." But of course I ignored them. I was doing it with this guy. But to be honest, it ended pretty quickly. As I'm getting dressed, he says, "Do you need me to drop you off at your best friend's, or can you stay and have dinner with me?" This boy was trying to cook me dinner. Of course I said yes. I text my best friend and tell her, "Why are you being so mean?" I told her that nothing happened, but she wouldn't believe me. That's when I told her that he was going to make me dinner at his house, and this is when she got even angrier. She said, "Why is he making you dinner? What did you do to have to get that dinner?" I told her nothing and she wouldn't leave me alone. That's when she started calling my phone. Of course I didn't answer. 3 minutes later, I get a call from my mom. I answered right away and pretended to be at my best friend's. And that's when my mom told me that my best friend called her and told her the truth. So I couldn't lie anymore. Took me to my parents' house and they were furious. My parents told this boy that he has to marry me. He literally ran away. I ran out of time. Part 4 will be up soon. After my bestie told my parents that I lost my V-card, they wanted to force me to marry the guy. And then he ran away. My parents were so furious. That's when I called my bestie to confront her about what she had done. But guess what? She ghosted me for 4 days. I even went to her house and confronted her, but she wouldn't open the door. My parents grounded me for 2 months. They took my phone away and all I could do was go to school and come back home. They even took me to the gynecologist. I was absolutely humiliated. And the boy, forget about it. He also ghosted me. My dad even wanted to go to the boy's house to confront his parents. But I managed to convince him not to. They even wanted to press charges because he's almost 18. Do you see how much drama this caused me? Finally, I see my bestie at school. And guess who she was with? Yeah, the boy who I lost my V-card to. She even made up a rumor that I begged this guy to do it with me, but luckily he does have a backbone and denied it. After about dating for a week, he broke up with her because she was being mean to me. That's when he came back to me and apologized. He said that he really liked me and he came to my parents' house and apologized. My parents finally accepted him. And we've been dating now for 6 months. And my bestie is not my bestie anymore. Bye, B. Story time about how my bully set me up to have me essayed and tried to starve me. And this is my own story time. I was in school, I was a total pushover. You guys, I never defended myself. Instead, my brothers and sisters would defend me all the time. Which is why I say my brothers and sisters are my best friends now. Anytime boys would bother me, my twin brother would be right there to defend me. And anytime a girl bothered me, my sister would literally fight for me. So I had this bully in school. I'm gonna call her B. B was the queen bee. All the boys and all the girls would do whatever she wanted. She was funny, she was charming, and she made everyone laugh. So I understand why she was popular in our class. But how can everybody do what one girl said? I mean, the power she wielded over these boys. B was new to our school and I could tell that she did not like me right away. In fact, I could hear her talking bad about me sometimes in class. And then when I looked at her, she would pretend like she was talking about somebody else. But nonetheless, she became friends with some of the girls that I was kind of friends with. By the way, I got bullied by almost everyone in my year, especially the girls. So one day B invites me and the rest of the girls over to her house. But little did I know that she had invited a boy to essay me. Part 2 is up. But that's when I realized she invited a boy to essay me. After school, we all get dropped off at our house. And nobody was home. Like, her mom wasn't even there, nobody was there. Although her little sister was there. Her little sister was only a year younger than us, but she wasn't that much younger. Her sister was a saint. She was super nice and kind. Right away when we got to her house, she tried to separate me from the group. First, I didn't know why she was doing that until I saw a boy. Let's call him William. Funny thing is that these people actually tried to follow me on Instagram, but I blocked them. Anyway, William literally came out of the shadows. Like, he was already in the house. Creepy. Anyway, everyone in class knew that William had a crush on me, which is why I used to stay away from him. So as soon as I saw him, my stomach dropped. That's when B tells me to go to the garage, and I needed to go get something for her. I walk with her to the garage, and William walks in too. Out of nowhere, she runs away and locks the door, leaving me and William alone. Instantly, I was afraid. Tried to talk to me, but then tried to kiss me right away. I kept turning my face and didn't want to. He tried to grab my you-know-what. And that's when he tried grabbing my you-know-what. Kept pushing his hand away while he was trying to stick his tongue down my throat. The whole thing was incredibly disgusting. Mind you, I'm 13 at the time. And I push him away really hard and start banging on the door. Linda opens the door, and everyone that was invited was listening through the door. And they all started cackling like it was hilarious what had just happened to me. Me, on the other hand, I was crying. I called my mom and asked her to pick me up. But my mom couldn't come right away. It would be like another hour before she could. William left and I felt much better. B then gave me a half-ass apology, which I look back and I'm like, at least she did, but still not cool. That's when she starts offering everyone food except for me. She warmed up tortillas and scrambled eggs and made everyone a plate, except for me. She looked at me and said, oh, there isn't enough for everybody. That's when her little sister comes up to her and says, stop being so mean, give her food. Her sister took me to the kitchen, warmed me up a tortilla and some of the leftover eggs. I sat down there with her sister and we both ate together. After that, her sister and I became friends. But B was so mad that her sister gave me food. They even got into a huge fight in front of us. Moral of the story, if your bully ever invites you over, just don't go. I have so many more personal stories. Should I do more? Story time about how my mother-in-law accused me of cheating on her son. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's not on my Instagram. My evil mother-in-law is the worst of the worst. The moment I started dating her perfect little son, she would make judgmental comments on my body, and if I was ever in the kitchen cooking, she would be there to try to criticize everything that I would do. When my husband and I finally got pregnant, she pretended to be happy. I could see deep down inside she was hating the fact that I was pregnant. I think she always had the hope that he would leave me. But let me give you some background info on my husband. This man is lucky to be with me. Not only am I a 12, I am so kind and caring to him, and I have way too much patience for him. Whereas my mother-in-law thinks that he's the one lucky to be with me. First off, I make way more money than my husband, so I'm the one paying for most of the bills. But guess what? My husband asked me not to tell his mom about that because he'd be embarrassed. He also doesn't know how to cook or clean. And guess why? Because his mother did everything for him growing up. So I'm the one that has to cook, clean, and pay for the bills. A few months ago, I asked my husband for a divorce. He ran over to his mom's house and tried to get her to convince me not to. But guess what? His mom called me and told me that she'd convince him to give me a divorce. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my mother-in-law accused me of cheating on her son. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's sent me on Instagram. So instead of her trying to convince me not to leave him, she told me that she would convince my husband to break up with me. This was all for my benefit because I was the one that wanted a divorce. But 2 weeks later, I find out I'm pregnant.
At the time, we were still living in the same house, but we weren't really talking. So I finally went up to him and told him that I was pregnant. He was so happy. You think he even gave me a hug or a kiss? No, he picked up the phone and called his mother right away. He called her on speaker and I could hear what she was saying. And as soon as he told her, she said, "It's probably not your kid." How could I have not seen this coming? At this point, she thought we were gonna get a divorce. So me having a kid was the worst case scenario for her. Right away, she told him to kick me out of the house that I pay for. That's when I grabbed the phone from him and I started telling her everything. First off, I told her that I paid for all the bills and that her son made only $200 a week from a stupid gaming thing and that he wasn't even bothering to look for another job. And then on top of paying for the bills, I still had to cook and clean. And I asked her, "Do you really think this is the kind of man I want to have a kid with?" She had no response. That's when she hung up the phone and told my husband to go over to her house. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how my mother-in-law accused me of cheating on her son. Disclaimer is now my storytime and send me on Instagram. When I broke the news to her that he didn't pay for any of the bills and that I was paying for the house, she literally lost her shit. My husband hung up the phone and told me that he would never speak to me again. God, if only that were true. Then he goes over to his mom's house and guess what? An hour later, he demands I go over to her house to apologize to his mother. I said that I would, but instead, I went over there and told her some more truths. I ended up telling her that her son told me not to tell her that he didn't make any money, and that the whole time he and I were together, she thought that he was paying for all the bills. Then I said, "Aren't you embarrassed that your son is like that?" That's when she told me the only way she would accept my child was with a paternity test. Am I supposed to do that with the baby in my belly? Finally, the baby was born and I was able to prove that it was his son. My husband wants us to stay together, but his mom keeps criticizing me. Every time she sees the kid, she says it doesn't look like my husband, even though I already proved that it was his. I think that I should get a divorce. I'm afraid my mother-in-law might do something to the baby. My husband thinks I'm just overreacting. What should I do?
Story time about how I did the dirty with my cousin. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Okay, before you all judge me, I come from a very small town. Very small. Background, my entire family and I come from a very small town. For miles and miles around us, there is nothing. The only thing around us to do is really just go to the mall. Growing up, my cousin and I weren't really close. He was always trying to bother me and he was always mean. I also didn't have siblings, but my dad did have kids with another woman, so I had a couple of stepsisters. But growing up, my stepsisters would compete with me in everything, school and boys. Our school only had 80 kids in it. So by the time I turned 17, the only boy that I was ever interested in ended up moving away from my town. And this boy didn't even know that I existed. At this point, my cousin had gone away for a couple of years, but then came back. And when he came back, the attraction was instant. I know you guys all want to gag right now, but like I said, I had no other options for boys. Remember I said my cousin used to bother me a lot? Well, one day he came up to me in school and apologized. And we both knew we were attracted to each other, so we just kept talking. One day he just grabbed me and kissed me. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I did the dirty with my cousin. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It's sent me on Instagram. My cousin kissed me for the first time that day. By the way, we were in school. He asked me to go behind one of the buildings in school. Out of nowhere, he grabbed me and kissed me. This was the first time I'd ever been kissed. So instantly, I was infatuated. And then after that, every single day we would go behind that building and kiss some more. And trust me, we both had conversations all the time about how we were cousins. But the problem was there was nobody in our town that we were interested in. So his parents, who are my uncles, suddenly they started inviting my parents over to their house. So we would all go have dinner at their house and hang out sometimes. And my cousin and I would take advantage and go make out in his room. No one ever thought to check on us. I mean, why would they? We're cousins. One of those times that we went over, we did the dirty. My cousin just started going for it and I didn't stop him. I wanted him to do it. All while our parents are downstairs. And then we kept doing it every day. After about a year, he had to move away for school. And to this day, nobody knows what we did. I haven't seen him in about 5 years, but trust me, if we saw each other again, I think we would do it again. Is that gross? I mean, I know it is, but whatever. Bye. Story time about how my father bribed my boyfriend to not break up with me. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's on my Instagram. Unfortunately, I have a lot of anxiety and I'm a very, very shy person. So it's always been hard for me to find friends and even harder to date men. I'm 37 and I've only ever been on one date. I come from a Latin family and this is unforgivable to them. Since I turned 20, my family has always asked me every single day of my life when I'm gonna find a man. As you can imagine, this adds even more to my anxiety because I just feel extremely pressured. Remember that one date I went on? Well, that was actually set up through my parents. I was 25 years old and my mom started getting personal training. Her personal trainer is the one she set up the date with. And this guy was a nightmare. He was rude to the waiters of the restaurant we went to, and immediately after that I just left. I didn't even give him a second chance. As you can imagine, my parents were furious. My mom actually told me that she wanted me to marry this guy, and I was like, have you met him? I've always been completely misunderstood. Fast forward to me being 37, I landed my dream job in New York City and I moved away from home. I was happy being independent and moving away from my parents. I even lost my virginity and I was happy about it. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my father bribed my boyfriend to not break up with me. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's something on Instagram. Finally lost my virginity at 37 years old. I was living by myself in New York City and I had finally moved away from my toxic parents. But my parents would call me every single day. And guess what they would ask? Did you finally meet someone at work? Apparently, I was about to meet somebody at work that I would marry. So this is how I met the guy I lost my virginity to. At work. I guess my parents were right. I work in fashion and marketing and every day I went to work I had to dress up really well. And it was fun. Again, for the first time in my life I was coming out of my shell. One of the editors at my job started noticing me. He invited me out to coffee and told me he wanted to show me the ropes. This was the first time that I found myself really attracted to a man. As you can imagine, I was so down. Ended up going to a bar and having wine together. After that, everything is a blur. I know that I kissed him and he kissed me back. That's when he asked me to go on a second date. And on the second date, we did it. I ended up losing my virginity and I called my parents and told them. This actually made them very happy. But now they said I had to marry the guy. But guess what? This guy wanted to be my boyfriend. And we started dating. But then I found something out. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my dad bribed my boyfriend to not break up with me. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, send me on Instagram. But that's when I found out that my boyfriend was bi. One day he just tells me that he's attracted to men. At this point, we'd been together for 6 months. This obviously broke my heart because he didn't tell me before. And also, my parents would never accept that. This man was basically asking me for an open relationship. He even told me that I should consider myself lucky that he didn't go cheat on me. This all rubbed me the wrong way. Even though I was in love with him, I knew that I couldn't accept that. But at my age, can I really afford to say no to a man? I finally ended up telling him that I don't think I would be comfortable with an open relationship. He instantly broke up with me. I called my parents to tell them and they were upset. That's when my father took it upon himself to call my boyfriend and tell him that he would pay him $6,000 to stay with me. And guess what my boyfriend did? This man accepted. He took $6,000 and stayed with me for another year. Exactly a year later on Christmas, my father tells me that I should be grateful to him. When I asked him why, he said, well, I paid him to stay with you. And you're happy now, aren't you? Should I break up with my boyfriend and break ties with my family? Story time about how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, send me on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 5 years. This man is the most prudish person I have ever met in my entire life. He never curses, he does not drink. Basically, he's never done anything naughty in his life. When we met, he was the perfect candidate for me. My parents are very religious and very strict. When they saw the way my husband was, basically super uptight, never wanting to do anything fun, they insisted that I marry him. So basically, this is all my parents' fault. To be honest with you guys, I never really was super attracted to him, but I knew that he would be a good provider. He's pretty high up in the company he works for, and he makes north of $300,000 per year. But I do own 2 of my own businesses, so it's not like I need him to survive. But my parents insisted on me marrying somebody who was already well off. And of course, one of my dreams is to become a mother, so I need a man who's going to be able to provide for me and my kids, especially when I'm pregnant. So we ended up getting married. Was there passion and chemistry? Not so much. But we did have a good time, and he would make me laugh. We essentially became really good friends. Up until I found some stuff on his laptop. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. One day while I was working from home, I needed to get on his laptop to check our cameras. I just gotten a new set of security cameras for our house. I needed to make sure that they were all working. I opened his laptop, typed in the password, and it was wrong. It always had the same password for the past 5 years. I didn't bother texting him, instead I tried to guess. And because I know this man so well, I guessed it in the first try. But as soon as I log in, there's about 5 Craigslist windows open, all with similar titles. Male looking for male. Male interested in male company. This literally shook me to my core. You're telling me that I'm married to a gay man and that he's hooking up with men off of Craigslist? That's when I went ahead and checked his email, only to find that he had been sending pictures and other things to these men. Not only that, but he had met with 2 of them. I instantly printed out all the evidence. Like I said in part 1, I'm not particularly attracted to my husband. I never have been. I really only married him because my parents pressured me into it. Here's what I did. Instead of just asking for a divorce, I wanted to humiliate him. I needed to make him pay. After printing everything out, I sent it to his job. And I sent it to his parents and my parents. Part 3 is up. That's when I sent videos of my own husband hooking up with other men to his job, my parents, and his parents. At this point, I had been married to a man that I wasn't attracted to for 5 years, only to find out that he was hooking up with other men. Off of Craigslist. Remember I said in part 1 how prudish my husband was? He always made himself seem like he was the perfect man, like he had never done anything bad in his life. But let me tell you, some of the things I read in those emails, and the pictures, and the video, disgusting. No wonder he put off having kids for so long, and no wonder he made me get on the pill, because he never had the intention of having kids. When everyone received their packages, my husband called me super upset. He said that he had only done it for about a week, and that it was just him experimenting. And he told me that his job put him on suspension. My parents, of course, stopped speaking to him. My mother-in-law calls me on the phone and tells me that she had always known that he was gay. And apparently they insisted on him not marrying me. But he was set on having the perfect wife. The perfect life. We're obviously getting a divorce now, and I'm getting all his money. Or at least I'm gonna try. He's already claiming that I'm obsessed with him, so he wants to get a restraining order. I need to make him suffer even more. How should I do this? Part 4 will be up soon.